question. Does the Creator know everything there is to know about this unascended sphere? So to understand the question, you need to have watched my video about how the world was created, where I explained that the ultimate created being that started our world of form is what I call the Creator. And it created a succession of spheres. It creates a sphere, it creates structures in the sphere, it sends self-aware extensions of itself into the sphere, who gradually raise the sphere, raise their own consciousness until they ascend. So there are 6 spheres prior to ours that have ascended, and ours is not yet ascended. That's why we have the ignorance, the suffering that we see on earth, because we haven't ascended. So the question is, does the Creator know everything that's going to happen ahead of time? And the answer is yes and no. It's one of those answers. But we first have to look at the question. You know, traditionally, you have these, it even goes back to the Greeks, so it goes beyond Christianity, but Christianity certainly got trapped in it. You have these questions of what God is like. And they say that God is almighty, all-knowing, and all-good. Because there is always this desire to create the view that God is the ultimate being. So God is the ultimate of everything. So in terms of knowing, of course, if God is perfect, God must be all-knowing, so God must know everything that's going to happen. But as I explained it in my video about how the world was created, the entire purpose of an unascended sphere is to give us an environment where we can experiment with our free will and our co-creative abilities. And God, the Creator, has given us complete free will to experiment with this. Even that we can go into this illusion that we are separate beings, whereas in reality we are of course all connected. We're all part of the one mind or the one body of God. So, and the purpose of an unascended sphere is really that we work out the use of free will so we come to a point where we no longer desire to use our free will as separate beings, we want to use them as connected beings. So, from this perspective, the Creator does not know everything that's going to happen in this sphere because it's up to the decisions we make. And as quantum physics has actually proven now, you can't predict the outcome of an experiment because it isn't decided until the experiment is made, until you make a decision. Even God can't predict what you're going to do. And God isn't trying to predict. No, God has given you free will. God doesn't want to predict. Why would the Creator need to predict what you're going to do with your free will? So the Creator doesn't know. There are multiple ways, you know. As I've explained, a new sphere is created. Our sphere was created by defining a certain level of the energy that makes up the sphere. And our sphere is denser than the 6 previous ones. They became gradually more dense. So there's a certain level of energy that's defined for our sphere. And this means that there are certain things we can do, certain things we can't do in this sphere because of the density of the energy. But even though there's a certain density of energy, there isn't just one way that a sphere can evolve and grow. So you have again, and you have the scientific view before quantum physics, that the universe is a big machine, and that if you knew the initial conditions and the laws that guide the machine, you can predict everything that's going to happen. So you see, we have 2 different ways of approaching this. The religious people that say, well, God knows everything that's going to happen, and the scientific people who say the laws of nature know everything that's going to happen. Everything is predictable. This is, as I explained in several videos, this is the ego. The ego has this obsessive-compulsive desire for security in this world. So it wants to define that the world is predictable, but it isn't the case. There are innumerable ways that our sphere can evolve. and still reach the end point where it ascends. But within that starting point that defines the energy and the ending point, the ascension of the sphere, innumerable ways that this can be done. And God doesn't have, the Creator doesn't have an opinion about there's one right way and all the others are wrong. So that's why, from this perspective, the Creator doesn't know. It doesn't know what decisions are going to be made by the self-aware extensions of itself. Because the whole idea of creating the self-aware extensions and putting them into an environment is that we expand our sense of self until we reach the Creator consciousness. And we do this by making a decision, seeing the consequence. Now, the reason why I say that the question can be answered with a yes or no is that ultimately you can say that the Creator does know what is going to be the end result of our sphere. It's going to ascend. But exactly how that happens, or even how long it takes, the Creator doesn't know, because that's up to us. And I know there are a lot of people that will object to this, because I see that even spiritual people, they want to find some spiritual teaching that gives the ego the certainty it wants. And, if that's what you want, then go find a teaching. There are many teachings out there that will tell you this, even spiritual teachings that will tell you this. But I just think that when you reach a certain level of oneness with your higher self, you separate yourself from the ego, you can let go of this desire for certainty. You can come to a point where you see it. You see that it's just the ego. That's this obsessive compulsive desire to find certainty. And that's when you can accept that there is no certainty because of free will. But there is, of course, a certain certainty in the sense that a sphere is moving towards it, and our sphere is in an ascending spiral. The consciousness is being raised, because it's pretty certain that most self-aware beings will eventually choose the upward path of transcending their sense of self and raising the collective consciousness. And why is that certain? It's actually certain because, I know when you look at this model I've given, that the masters have given, with these spheres. The first sphere was not as dense energy, so it was easier to see that there was something beyond the energies in the sphere. So I used to think that, well, it was easier for the beings in the first sphere to ascend. And yes, in a sense it was, because it was easier to see beyond their environment, to see there's something beyond their environment. And as the spheres have become denser, it's become more difficult to see that. But I have also realized, it took me a while, also realized that as the spheres become denser, it actually becomes easier to see the limitations of our own state of mind. And this attempt, especially when we go into separation and we attempt to define reality. Because the denser the spheres, the more intense the suffering we create in duality. And therefore, the shorter the time span it takes until we have had enough of it. So you could say that in the first sphere, it was easier because of the lightness of the energies in the sphere. But in our sphere, it's not more difficult because of the density of the energies in our sphere. So either way, whether it's easier to see beyond the energy or whether the energy creates more intense suffering, either way, there's the same opportunity to see through it, and therefore to see beyond the environment we're in, and to stop defining ourselves in relation to the environment. And that's really what the purpose of the spheres is, that we start out in a certain environment, but eventually we graduate from that environment when we stop defining ourselves in relation to the environment, but instead to start defining ourselves in relation to our Creator.